You. I've really been enjoying all of these talks, and it's cool how relevant this is. Sort of one big discussion that's all related. So I was excited to see in Brian's talk his Pro-Am Ed there, the Pro-Am education collaborations, because that's a lot of what I talk about. And then I'm excited. I want to be the first person to use Ahmed's 1-meter telescope for my student research. So there's lots of great stuff going on. And so to set this up, I just want to have you think about for just a moment how you got inspired in astronomy. If there was anyone that helped you, when it first was, what inspired you? Because there's so many people out there who have some sort of inspiration they're interested in, perhaps don't have mentorship or a place to go, and we all here can change that. I was not one of these people, but at 9 years old wanted to be an astrophysicist. I am not. Could have been different. I'm okay with where I am now, though. But these are all kids that I've interacted with that, man, if they could find mentors and just, they are so passionate and they're tiny. Okay. So I taught high school chemistry and astronomy for 10 years, and the whole time was trying to figure out how to make education relevant and meaningful to these students. How do you really engage their passion? And I can tell you, every time you bring in astronomy, it ups the level of the engagement and the interest, and there's just something about this field that can capture students in a way that we need to sort of use that to help people understand science. So you've heard for a couple years now about the Astronomy Research Seminar that was started by Russ Janae. These are some students from 2008, and what I've been doing is I've started interviewing students that have been taking this seminar from over the last 10 years, actually. The original seminar was done in person at Cuesta Community College, and they did a lot of astrometric eyepiece measurements at the telescope, and then Russ went out to some local high schools and worked with those students, and then I know that there were a number of people from this organization that over the years have helped out. They've gone up to Pine Mountain and done observations up there. So this seminar has a long history, and I want to mention the idea of the community of practice, and I know that Russ has been talking about that for a couple of years now here, but it really is an amazing community, and bringing people into this community and engaging with the community is so crucial to education for basically the country, but science, anyone interested in science, getting them engaged in this community. So this is 4 years ago, my first time I attended this conference. I didn't know anything about any of what was going on here. It was all really new to me. Someone invited me, I showed up. An interesting note on the right there, I saw Doug Welch's talk about supernova echoes, and I'd never heard of that before. It was amazing. He's now one of the invited speakers at the 2nd annual Conference on Robotic Telescopes, Student Research and Education that I'm one of the science organizing chair people for in Hawaii. So it's just amazing how the community can really expand. Good quick story here. I was here, didn't know anyone. I heard someone say, "Hey, Russ Janae, he's a force of nature." And I was like, "Who's that guy? I've never heard of him." Sorry, Russ. But then I said, "I want to meet that force of nature." So then half an hour later, someone said, "Oh, there's Russ Janae at the bar." And I said, Where? Went up, introduced myself. And 4 years later, we have an Institute for Student Astronomical Research. We've become a nonprofit organization. We have dozens of students, and there's lots of sort of offshoot programs that have developed over the years. But I kind of want to just sort of thank you to this community for being here. So when I first started that, I hadn't had any training in astronomy, and I was working with students, in my high school students, and I wanted them to do research. I joined up with Russ. We tried it. It was really difficult because I, at that point, didn't have I didn't have all the tools and the supporting community that I really needed to do these things that I had never done before, but knew were really cool, and the students loved it. But we did, get some data and published in the Journal of Double Star Observations on a couple of these double stars. But we then, we had many conferences over the last 4 years, and developed this, like I said, is now a nonprofit, website. We have a textbook. We've developed lots of materials. The Small Telescope Astronomical Research Handbook. This is sort of the textbook for the course. And we have a whole online learning management system now developed that can be shared outside of Cuesta College, where we developed it. It sort of goes through all of what we teach and how we have students do research. We have YouTube videos, for those of you that were interested in that, that go along, you know, how to use Astro Image J. I was very excited to hear about John's program because one of the big problems or small problems we've always run into is getting the program downloaded onto someone's computer, and it works on some, it doesn't work on others, so it would be neat to have something that always worked. Again, this idea of community of practice. In education, you always want to sort of think about what framework does your program fall under, and ours was sort of experiential learning, sort of project-based learning, but none of those really fit except this idea of communities of practice. And Russ invited Etienne Wenger, who developed the whole philosophy of communities of practice, to come and talk with us, and we've met with him, and it's been really inspirational, actually. But from his book from 1998, some of the concepts, learning transforms our identities, and I want to read a little bit more about that. It transforms our ability to participate in the world by changing all at once who we are, our practices, and our communities. And one of the things that we really emphasize and think about in our astronomy research seminar is getting students to a point where they feel like they are contributing, where they are scientists, not where they're just doing something in the lab that they were told to do, which is what most sort of undergraduate experiences or high school experiences are, right? And so that's a really important part of what we do. Transforming their identities, and some of the evaluation we're doing is talking to students and saying, did that happen? And then information for its own sake is meaningless. It must capture our identities and expand them. It is more important for the informational content of an educational experience to be identity transforming than to be complete in some abstract way. So if you can think about back to classes that you've been in, and I know for all the education that I've been through, you can learn so many facts and even procedures and understand it. But if you're not really incorporating it into what you do and interacting with people who are doing it, it loses most of its value. And I wanted to mention we got a National Science Foundation grant a year or two ago, and they've been supporting us in expanding. Another part of this community, which is amazing, and many of you probably have heard now about GBO, the Great Basin Observatory in Great Basin National Park. This is a consortium of 4 universities that got the grant for this observatory. It saw first light 2 Augusts ago. But another aspect where this community has had a big role in the students that we work with, last year, I mentioned to Bob Denny that I wanted to learn how to use ACP, because I did, and he was like, hey, I'll show you how to use that. So we sat at the bar right out there on Saturday night, and he showed me how to use it. We logged into that telescope with it's a CDK 700, thanks Planewave. And it just so happened that the next day, Russ and I were already scheduled to go meet with a team of students down at Concordia University. So we went down there, and we met with the students, and one of the lessons we've learned, one of the things that makes this astronomy research seminar successful is having students take leadership, take ownership of their projects. Let's see, someone mentioned the students, John said they never set their hands on a telescope or design their own experiments. And here we really try to have students take ownership and give them, in a short period of time that we have, give them enough information where they can choose projects. And so up in the right-hand corner, you can see Lila. We taught them a little bit about double stars and orbits, and then Russ and I left the room, and they went through and selected what object they wanted to study. And then we opened up my computer. I will say, Paul Gardner, I had to get on the phone with him and say, I know how to use ACP, but I don't know how to get into the computer. But he walked me through it. We got into the computer, and they were able to submit their observation requests on ACP that day, and then they have a published paper. It was accepted a couple months later, and it's now been published. That was the first paper that came out of Great Basin Observatory. So that was really amazing how this community, was able, the people that I was interacting with and the students down there, we were able to really get them doing research. It was amazing. There's a couple things I want to point out here. Lila's the second author on this. She got so excited, she just wanted to keep going. This is a really common theme in this astronomy research seminar, and where students, they do it, and then they are like, oh, this is fun, I want to do some more, and I want to do some more. I think our student with the most published papers, Joe Johnson, it's on the order of 20. But but we have a number of students that 3, 4, 5, and now we have students that are going and teaching other people how to do this seminar. It's really something. And the other thing to point out, you'll see Dave Rowe is on here, Richard Harshaw, he's been doing double star work for decades, and he helps out, and just getting these students interacting with those who already know this and have been doing it for a long time. It's pretty exciting, and I want to thank Dennis Conti and Dave Rowe. Gosh, I don't know how these people get involved in so many things, but thank you for all your help in education. They've helped me start doing exoplanet photometry and stuff like that with students. Let's see, so this is just a sort of a list of how this program has spread to different organizations over the years. This isn't even complete. There's the College of the Desert, its picture. Paso Robles High School actually just joined, and we had a course last semester. So there's high school students, and they've written up their paper and submitted it. It was accepted for publication a couple weeks ago, and they're now going up to Mount Wilson Observatory to use the big telescope there to do some more research. It's just really amazing how this program is expanding. There's some of the papers. I'm not going to show you them all. We have 150, more than 150 now over the last 8 years, actually. They're making a big contribution. The left graph shows the number of JDSO papers from the student teams over the last 8 years, and in 2016 there was a special edition with lots of papers, and the percentage of papers in the JDSO from these student teams over the last 8 years is a little misleading. It looks like we're just kicking out all the other people contributing to the JDSO, but that's not true. The total number of journal articles has increased as well. I've interviewed students. This is just to give you a rough idea. I've been interviewing students who took the courses when they were in 8th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and then 14 just stands for community college. Blue is girls, green is boys, just to give you a sense. And some of the things that we have found from them, they were a little surprising to me when we asked what were the best things that you got out of the seminar. It was never, I learned about double star orbits or stars. So for example, a student who took it as a 10th grader, this girl said, one of the best was that collaborative environment. I've worked in teams before, but it was different. There was a lot of people from different backgrounds, different grade levels, different experiences, and being able to work one-on-one with the professor, it was really interesting, an experience I've never had before. And then, of course, being able to say, I have a published paper, a research paper, that's come in handy so many times, and she says she's currently looking for internships and bringing that up, and that's making a big impact. When I interviewed Lila yesterday, she talked about how she's now doing a master's degree, or starting a program in a couple weeks, and she said every professor she interviewed with said, you wrote that you have 2 publications here, so what job did you play in that publication? And she said at first it took her by surprise, and she thought, oh, I didn't. I did the whole thing. I learned about the background of the stars, I collected the data, I analyzed the data, I wrote the paper and then edited it, and I think she said edit 5 times. It's really important. That's the hard part of the course, is getting that paper right. And I submitted it to the journal for publication. And she said the professors were always astounded to hear that. This is a true research experience. So that's the kind of thing that we hear from a lot of students. A lot of them are using their research papers in applications for graduate school. I had one student say, it didn't help me get in, a student who took it in high school said, it didn't help me get into college. She said, I don't even think I put it on my application, but it is helping me get internships now. But then we have had students who said, oh my gosh, yeah, it helped me get into college. It helped me get scholarships. Not all of them say that. Scientific writing, this is one of the biggest impacts. The students say, you know, in addition to teamwork, writing scientific papers. Those are the 2 things that impact the students the most. And these are really critical 21st century skills for science, right? Learning how to work together, learning how to write. I've had students compare this writing to their AP Physics courses, where that's supposed to be college level. That's the sort of the highest you get generally in high school. And they said, when I looked at the papers in the Journal of Double Star Observation and what we wrote, it was way more advanced than what I was doing in my AP Physics class, right? So it's really making a big difference for these students. Do you consider yourself a scientist? This is a really interesting one. And almost all of the students said yes. The students that I would say are classically higher academically. That just means they tend to score better on standard measurements. You know, what we would call the better students, although they're not, the way we measure it is all wacky, but they often will be the ones that say, no, I'm not really a scientist. Well, let me think about that. And I've had to sort of have them then define scientist, and sometimes they'll come to the conclusion, oh, yes, I am a scientist. But most of the students say yes, and then they'll sort of talk around it for a while and then say, well, I've published papers, I've contributed to the data, I've given talks. There's all these different reasons, and they're starting to identify as scientists. And again, as I mentioned earlier, learning is much more powerful if we're changing identities, and that it seems to be, for many of these students, we are. Let's see. How did the astronomy research seminar most benefit you? This was, let's see, I had another quote here, if I can find it. Excuse me. Right here. Oh, this is the funny one. I learned how to write a research paper and how to work as a team in a real-world way, unlike the equal participation stuff I have learned to dislike. Right? That's important. They continued, I wasn't really in it for the astronomy, but it turns out that was pretty fun too. Awesome. Okay. We do advertise it as an astronomy research seminar, so I'd be curious, I didn't ask, like, why'd you take the course? In a survey of 22 students from a year ago spring, we did an online survey, and 43% of the responses to how did the seminar most benefit you, 43% of the responses said paper writing. And to me, as having been a high school teacher, oh my gosh, people don't know how to write anymore. Do you guys see that out there? It's really frustrating. And so the idea that that's what they're getting from this is how to write, and how to write scientifically. And a lot of their answers when I interviewed, or they had free response answers to these, they talked about the difference between scientific writing and all the other writing. And that's crucial. And I suspect many of us don't get that until we're in graduate school. And then the scientific research part, again, we don't get that until we're in graduate school. I should mention these courses, and some of these students that I've been interviewing, they took this seminar in some form in 8th grade. So we have students that have published papers. Sean Gillette spoke here last year about that at Vanguard Academy, and he has this amazing program where he has like students, so many students want to take it, they actually have to write essays to be accepted into the program. And that's another interesting story about that sort of selects for better writers, which at that age tends to be girls, which I think is great because we're now getting this large cohort of girls that are publishing, you know, basic double-star astrometry research and going on. And I've interviewed some of them, and it's pretty phenomenal. Some of the people also thought the astronomy they learned a lot, and that was beneficial. But the teamwork, and these are some of the things that we really emphasize and recognize as valuable. So a lot has come out of the conversations here, the network of people. One of the things, and some of you may have heard, and some people who were here last year ended up going to the first annual conference on robotic telescopes, student research, and education. So that's RTSRE, and that was in San Diego last year. Our second one is coming up in Hawaii. Feel free to, come join us. Great conversations and, exciting volcanic activity to study. Man, if you like volcanoes, this is the time to go. And then it's co-located with the International Astronomy Teaching Summit, which is for college Astronomy 101 courses. But anyway, but one of the cool things that came out of that conference last year was a partnership for education with Las Cumbres Observatory. So they have 10 0.4 meter scopes located around the globe, and they now have partnerships with like 18 organizations, including Brief, I'm sure you might hear about that, and Instar, our organization, and a bunch of other ones, where we just have free access to these telescopes. And they are like, use it, and it's amazing. We wrote little proposals, but they accepted the ones that they thought were really valuable, and that's amazing. And that came out of that conference, along with many other things. Lastly, I'll just say, because I only have 1 minute left, tomorrow we're going to have a workshop for 4 hours in the morning, 8:30 to 12:30. If you're still around, feel free to join us about student research, education, collaborations. I love seeing these things about collaboration that everyone's talking about, and curriculum design and all that. We have some students from Arizona who will present. They did the astronomy research seminar this past spring, and they are going to present their work. And actually, we have students from San Diego coming up to talk about their work, and they're also going to be presenting at the Robotic Telescope Conference, and they're helping organize it. Anyway, it's been an amazing experience for me, for the students, and it's really growing. And I would like to encourage anyone that's here that is interested in collaborating, working with education in whatever capacity you can, sharing your telescopes, etc., to join this fun party. Thanks. Questions? Uh-oh. Russ? 8:30.